Thank you guys for watching the Animal One Guys YouTube channel. If you like my content, leave a comment down below. Ask me questions, let me know what you liked about it. And hey, click on the little like button. But please, if you want, go ahead and subscribe, because it helps my channel out. That way you can stay up to date with all my videos. And if you want, click on the bell icon to get notified. Right? Right? Huh? 1 out of 2. Not bad. Hey rescue family, how's it going? I wanted to make this video because I get asked this all the time. So how do I personally light and heat my bearded dragon enclosures? And I have a unique setup because I have, multiple bearded dragon tanks with multiple bearded dragons all in the same room. But these principles can apply. It's just a little bit easier when you don't have to manage so much heat. In a reptile that needs heat, but not a lot of heat. It needs a little bit of humidity, but not a lot of humidity. So what are some of the fundamental things that you should always have, though? Okay, guys, so I like to keep the setups pretty simple. I like to give the reptiles out time, and I know what the bearded dragons use, what they don't use, etc. But there are some things that we need. Hi, Phoenix. Hi, good morning. Number one is you do want a laser temp gun, because you are going to want to get in there and shoot the temperatures of some areas and see what the temperatures are, and things like that. This is very important. You need it, you need it, you need it. Number two, you need a thermostat, ding, 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 that is going to control some type of overnight heater. I like to have one just in case it ever gets too cold. Then you need to have, I like to have other temperature probes inside and outside that are going to measure a couple things. They're going to measure temperature. This one's set to Celsius. It must have been moving around with it. And you're going to want them set to do humidity as well. So why is this important? So we know bearded dragons need some humidity, around 35 to 40%. Too low, they'll have trouble shedding. Too high, they'll get respiratory infections. So I like to have ones that sit in the tank and ones that just have probes go in the tank. So, boom, now we're monitoring, and don't worry, we'll get to how I control all this. But, by the way, a thermostat like this Accu one here, I'm not sponsored by any ways. One nice thing, does humidity, does temperature, can do it in Celsius as well. But the other nice thing is, do you see the numbers below 72 and 82 and 31 and 37? It keeps a record of, for the past 12 hours, the lowest humidity and the highest humidity. And same thing with temperature, the lowest temp and the highest temp. So it gets to about 82 degrees on the hot side, the hottest it gets during peak heat of the day. And during night, it gets to 72. And then we can see the humidity. It's 31 to 37. So we got perfect temperatures day through the night, as well as current monitoring. And then these types of probes, these RepuZoom ones, are really nice because you put in 2 probes. One's a humidistat, one's a thermostat, so you can see the temperatures, which is nice. You can also click it because it also has a built-in temperature probe right inside here to get the room temperatures. Okay, nice. Then I also have just one that sits in the room outside of the tanks, so I can get the temperature of the tank, the room, and the humidity of the tank and the room, which is important. Normally the room will run a little bit cooler because the room is not, closed in with all this heat bellowing into it. So you see it gets to about 79, 80 degrees in the room, and it gets to about the mid-80s. That's what we want to see. So that is really good. Now, how do I achieve, not in a 20,000 square foot facility, how do I achieve these perfect temperatures? Okay, it has a lot to do with the type of tank that I chose, but you can make modifications to closed tanks. And things that you do to them. So the first thing that I do is I do really love these Exoterra glass enclosures. I just feel like the QA is nicer. Yes, you could get some closed-in ones that aren't all glass. That works too. But one nice thing is screen top is pretty important if you have trouble with humidity. The only way to control humidity are 2 things: airflow or a dehumidifier. Dehumidifier will generate heat. And then what? You're putting it inside the tank. Is the reptile going to knock it over? Are you going to remember to empty it? Is she going to bite the power cord? Things can happen. So with these ExoTerra tanks, and ZoomEd and other glass tanks do this too, you can remove the front lip and expose these vents. So they make it so these vents can be opened or closed. If you open these vents, and the top is screened and open, you get airflow. And airflow is going to help control humidity. The other thing that we'll see is I have a sock back here. The sock is full of just dried white rice. That's all it is. This helps absorb humidity. This doesn't help a ton. Typically, I see about a 3% control. So you'll drop about 3% humidity. I just throw them in. You could put them in a more colorful sock. I've seen people put it in a sock, but then put it underneath like a rock enclosure inside the log hide. You can do whatever you want. Okay, so we've got socks and some enclosures. We've got humidistats. We've got thermostats. What are we doing then as our sources for these things? Good questions. So my lights are obviously on timers, and so are my main heater. I'm using Arcadia in this tank for all the bearded dragon tanks. These Arcadia bulbs. These are 2-foot bulbs. They're the 12%, and they go in this nice reflector that they sell, and it puts down the perfect amount of UV for me at this distance. And how do I know? I've talked about it before. I measure it with a solar meter, because that's going to tell me, did I need a stronger bulb? Is my bulb too strong? Should the bulb go inside the tank? Should this bulb be elevated up higher because it's pumping out too much UV? It's going to be bad for my dragon. I get all that narrowed down. Then heat sources, okay? You've got a lot of options. But for me, because I have so many racked next to each other, I need to be able to precisely control my heat. So I do this with 2 domes. Every bearded dragon tank has 2 domes. One is hooked up to a thermostat, like I've said before, just for overnight heat. So it's set at 71, so it'll kick on when it gets to 70, when it gets plus or minus, these are 5 degrees of 71. So this will kick on at high 60s and kick off at 71. Most of the time, it never runs, but I like to have that precaution because bearded dragons, we know, they can safely get cool to just under 65 degrees, 63, 64, 65, and be fine. And you do want them to have that thermoregulate. That's why seeing about a 10-degree thermoregulation in air temperatures is really important for long health, because they do need to cool down at night, and that process slows down a lot of their bodily functions, which needs to happen. And then they do need that slow heat up over the day. They can't just go from 71, 72 straight to the high 80s. There needs to be that slow incline in the morning. So if you wake up in the morning, you touch your bearded dragon, and it's still kind of cool and the heat light just turned on, that's good. That's important. So what are in these domes? You have some options. You can use mercury vapor bulbs, but those can't be dimmed. And in this case, they'd pump out too much heat because I would have too many next to each other. Okay. You can use heat bulbs, which are just normal incandescent lights, floodlights, things like that. That just by nature of how they produce light, they produce a lot of heat in the making of that light. Or, in this instance, I use ceramic bulbs. So these produce no light, which is one you need for at night. But 2, these type of bulbs allow you to do the most accurate dimming possible. So I just have these lamp dimmers. They're rated to pass through 300 watts. We don't see that anymore with LED bulbs, but you used to be able to see them back in the day. But when you put a ceramic heat emitter, in this case, these are 50-watt ceramic heat emitters. That's what I needed for this room. And the reason why it's different is because you'll notice the tanks on the bottom, I have them up at 100% to get these temperatures because they are lower to the ground, so they are cooler. Whereas when we move up, these are set to about 50 or 60% power. And it's different even for the different tanks on the same shelf because some get cooler, some get warmer. So that's why it's important you're testing the basking area. Although my setups look kind of the same, 8-inch dome, 50-watt ceramic heat bulb, and the hammocks are kind of placed under them. They're not the precise height. You know, I don't go in here and fine tune. So she might need to be at 45% power right next door, the same tank. He might need to be at 50. So by using a ceramic heat bulb, in this instance, I'm able to precisely control the heat in each tank individually. And these needs need to change. In the winter, my home is colder than in the summer. So I need to be able to crank up the heat in the winter, but I need to be able to lower it in the summer. So by giving myself that level of control, I can control all of that super nice, super easy. Humidity is controlled because we've got airflow. And if humidity ever became a problem, you put a little fan up here to pull in more air. That's going to circulate more air. Humidity will be fine. We have the dimmers controlling the heat. So the bearded dragons can get heat, but also they can thermoregulate. Hot side, cool side. My thermostats are spread throughout the tank. This is on the warm side. This is on the warm side. This is on the cool side. That's great. So we want to have all these numbers. They're at different heights and everything. It doesn't become hard. I would still do these philosophies if I had one bearded dragon, because then I could be measuring hot, cold, basking spot, nighttime temperature, have a nice little easy record, and be done and measure the UV. UV control is really important. Most are getting not enough. The other half are getting too much. And then if you don't have a meter, you don't know how it's getting enough. But okay, so you have all those things. It's not super complicated. You would only have to do this one time. You don't need to use the exact brands I use, but that's how I like to do it. UVB, basking, nighttime, just in case. Nighttime has to be on a thermostat because you do want heats to change. How do you feel, Mongo? He's just laying down. The basking lights have only been on for about 15 minutes. They just woke up. So this is the best time. Oh, please don't fall off the hammock while we're recording you. That would be quite... So what happens when brumation comes along? And I've hit this before, but I thought I'd throw it in here. Whenever my reptiles are brumating, I like to turn off the UVB light source. Which, for me, I'm lucky because it doesn't... My heat is not producing light. I do keep the heat on. It doesn't mean it's pitch black because there's the natural light of the room and then the light of the tanks next to it. But I like to keep my bearded dragon as comfortable as possible. And if you have light doing your heat, then you can't separate. You have to have the light on to have the heat on. This just makes the bearded dragon more relaxed and they feel more comfortable brumating in the middle of their tank rather than smashed in a hide. And people say, well, my bearded dragon's brumating and I haven't seen it for 4 months. You know why he's brumating in the cave? Because his lights are on. So if you can darken his tank, keep his heat controlled, right? Everything is still set up the same. Then he'll be fine sleeping right in the middle of the tank. And you can still see them. And the small light of the room is not going to disturb them. They're still going to feel comfortable. You can't achieve that by doing it the other way. Not that the other way is bad. I just bring it up because I like this is better. It's more relaxing for them, and I still get to walk by and view them. So you can, during brumation, shut off the UVB light source and just keep the tank heated. It's a nice trick. Now, when you can't do that is when you're cohabbing, and unfortunately, they're both not brumating, so she's awake. She's asleep in there, so she has to go in there to brumate because it's the only dark area in the tank. Hopefully this has answered a lot of questions for you guys. Once again, I always want to say thank you to everyone who subscribes and watches these videos. And a special thank you to all the Patreon members. You guys made the whole reptile rooms possible, all the wiring that I needed to change. People had always been concerned, are you overamping these rooms? And I'm able to do all of that correctly now because of your help. Thanks, guys. Take care. Thank you guys for supporting my reptile rescue family.